All right, so we are continuing from chapter 8.2. That is where we would have left off from last week. Now, a brief recap. Um, we were looking at basically the structural layout of a database, basically what are its parts, and out of the four parts here, which is the smallest?
Sir, the field.
The field, very good. The field is the smallest. That is the smallest part of your database. So, next question. Can we have a field without a table? Is that possible? Is that legal? Think about it logically. Is it possible to have a field without a table? Yes, no, remark?
No, sir, no.
Why not?
Because the table consists of records and the records consist of fields, so the table should have fields inside of it.
Good.
As it is, the table consists of records and record consists of fields.
Very good. So you cannot have a field without having a table. So that's a very important fact to remember. You cannot have a field without having a table in the first place. So the reason why we have this diagram here, this figure here, is for you guys to remember the order basically that you create a database. First, for a software database, a computerized database, you would create that database file. I showed you guys that when we used Microsoft Access, we created that blank document and we created a file that is creating the database there. And in your database, the next thing you have to do is to create a table. I think I started a list of things of tasks that you need to carry out to create a database. I think I gave you guys 3 steps so far. What are the 3 steps? No one wrote them down? Robert? Or he took down his hand? Or he was testing that raise hand feature?
Sir, I wrote down the steps.
Yes, what are the steps?
Sir, the first one is to create the database, second one is to create the table, and the third one is to design the table.
Very good. So, the question, Robert, was the steps for creating a database. Steps to create a database. So we're going to continue these steps today. 1, create database file, basically. Then create tables, design tables. So you guys should have up to there. We're going to continue that today. And based on those steps, it is clear that you must create a table before you have any sort of data inside of your database. If you do not have a table, then you will not be able to have records, you will not be able to have fields, which represents your data. So unless you have a table, only then will you be able to have a record, and only then will you be able to have fields. but obviously it's fields and then records, because you can. Is it possible for a table to not have a record? Is that possible? No. It's a yes and no, because we have the definition here for a record. A record consists of a number of fields. So I cannot tell you exactly if a record could be considered of only one field, because remember, a record goes across. So if a table only has one column, then is that one column, that single field, would that be considered a record there? That's a question you could ask yourself. I'm not sure if a single field is considered a record, but I'll look into it. So, but obviously you need a field first, and then you will get records. So that is the structure of your database there. Then we looked at different objects in your database. What is a table, what is a query, a form, and a report. Those are the different objects in your database. And then we started with, or we ended last week, or last class, with basically how we design our table. So you create a table, but then you have to design your table. What is a part of designing your table? Well, creating your field names, setting your field types, setting your field length, setting your field description, and your field properties. So those are steps 1 to 3 so far. So for those who cannot remember, in your database application, enable content, in your database application, you go to create, and there you will see table. You create your table. That's how you create your table. You go to create, you select table. That is how you create a table. But now you have to design this table here. To design, you have to go to design view. So there's numerous ways you can go to design view. So for example, when you're on create, you don't see that option. So you have to go to the home tab, then you're going to see design view, or you go to table fields, then you can see design view. Or I think if you right click also, notice if you right click on the name there, you have design view. Also if you right click out here, you have design view. And even at the bottom right, there's also design view. You have 5 places where you can locate that option to design your table. So once you're in design view, here is where you are going to create your field names, set your data type, set your description, set your field properties, field size, and so on, and the different field properties option. So are you guys clear so far on creating a table?
Yes, sir.
So we're going to go more into detail now about the rules that we have to follow when we are designing. There are certain rules that we must follow. The first rule is about field name, and we're going to have, let's see, where do we start? Let's start from Jikia. Yeah, we start with Jikia. field name? Yeah, we're not hearing anything, or is it just me? Or did you have the same problem last week? Alright, Joshua? Joshua, are you there? Jonathan? Are you guys hearing me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Jonathan? I saw you on mute.
Yes, sir.
Alright, go ahead.
Field name. The name of each field which identifies the data should be meaningful. For example, you should not have a field labeled name since you would not know if it is referring to a first name or a last name of someone. A product or a country, the order table, figure 8.3, contains 3 field names, CID, PRID, and QTY. In some database programs, a dash or an underscore is used if more than one word makes up a field name, such as first underscore name. In others, they can be written together as first name. Data type. Oh,
We can pause there. So, when you are when you're designing your table, one of the first parts of designing is going to be creating field names. That is the first aspect of designing. Well, obviously before that, you have to name the table, and then you can create your field names. So you create a table, and to design your table, you give it a name and you create your field names. Now, what are the rules for creating field names? Well, the name must be meaningful. This is something we learned in spreadsheet, and we're going to continue to stress upon throughout IT. Anything you give a name to must be meaningful. It must make sense. We must be able to understand exactly what that name represents. For example, you cannot just give the name of a field the word name. Yes, you might be putting in the name of persons. You know you are putting in the name of persons, but to other persons, they will not know whose name you're referring to. Is it, even if it's for persons, they might be wondering, is it their first name? Is it their last name? And then some persons might even wonder, name of what? Name of persons, name of animals, place, thing, whatever the case may be. So whatever name you're given, it should be clear as to what data is inside of it. First name, the last name, or whatever it is represented. So that's the first point there when it comes to creating field names. It must be meaningful. Next, we do not use spaces when we're given names. So point number 2, we do not use spaces. So for example, first name, we do not write first and then a space and then name. So to take up that space, you can either use a dash or an underscore, or you can have no space at all. For example, what you see at the very bottom here. First, and then the first letter of the next word, you can capitalize it. So you have 3 ways that you can um, replace basically that space that you would use to um, for multiple words. Now, one of the reasons as to why you would want to not use any spaces is because obviously if you write first name, then that's two different words there. And sometimes, especially in IT, that can cause problems when you use a space, because using a space to the computer, it's going to pick it up as two different words. Now to you, you can visually see that it's referring to one specific topic, first name. But the computer does not look at it that way. It's going to see the space and it's going to think of it as two different words. So in some cases, spaces can work, but when you're naming something, especially in IT, you cannot use spaces because you need to basically give it as one word, one single word. So either having no space or using a dash or an underscore. Are you guys following?
Yes, sir.
Great. Next, we're going to move on to data type. So we've created our field name. Now next, we need to set our set data type for field name. So for each individual field name, we need to set the data type. So if we create a field name of last name, we need to set the data type. If we're gonna create it for first name, we need to set the data type. So what are the different data types that we have? Karishma, can you read that for us?
Data types. The data types determine what kind of data can be entered as well as what operations the database can perform with the data. Again, using the bookshop in example figure 8.3, the field CID would be of type text, also known as character or alphanumeric. But QTY would be a number. It is therefore important to work out the data types for each field. The most common data types are shown in table 8.3.
Very good. So why do we set data types? Because we need to indicate what kind of data is going to be stored into that field so that we can also know what operations can be carried out. Operations meaning mathematical operations. Can we add it? Can we subtract it? Can we multiply it? What can we do with it later on? So knowing what kind of data, the system knowing what kind of data is in that field, it will know what it can do with the data, basically. So we have some examples here of data type. We have the text data type. Now, memo has been renamed as long text. So in older versions, we had a memo data type. It's now replaced with short long text. And today, instead of text, we have short text. So once again, in database, this is the design view. Remember, you see all of this in the design view. And right next to the field name on the right hand side column, you're going to see the data type. And if you notice the first two, we have short text and long text. So long or short text, what kind of data is stored inside of them? Text, letters, numbers, special characters, and so on. They basically allow any and everything inside of them. So that's your first data type there. 2, we have number, also known as the numeric field, which is used for strictly numbers. So if we go to our database, we click on the drop down, notice we have the number, and we also have large number. I'm assuming that is similar to short and long text. If you notice, when we click on short text, we have a maximum of 255 characters. Actually, let me check that now. Number, access, number versus large number. What is the difference? Alright, that requires a bit of reading to clarify that. But just know for now, we have the number data type that is to for us to enter number. And also you should remember what is the maximum characters that can go into a short text data type. That is 255 characters. So anytime your field requires more than 255 characters, that is the only time you are going to use long text. Once you're 100% sure it is going to be 255 characters and less, you're always going to use short text. 3, we have date time. So obviously that's going to be used for date, day, month, year, and so on. We have currency, dollar, amounts of money. We can use it for different types of currency also. Auto number. This is an important one. Auto number allows us to have a number that increases automatically as each record is added. Remember, we learned what is a record. A record is basically a row. So every time a row is added, this number will increase automatically. Now, why is this important? Because in some cases, we will need a number to automatically increment. Like for example, notice the very first one, ID. We have auto number set there. I'm just gonna go back over here. I notice every time I enter some new information, that new row automatically adds or increments that number there for you. We're going to learn later on why that is so important. We're not going to look at it now because there's an entire topic about that. So, but just know for now that auto number automatically increases the number for you. Next, we have the Boolean data type or yes/no data type. So, I think that was something. Was it this class or another class? Either way, we have that data type, which is used for indicating one of two values. So whether something is yes or no, true or false, on and off, and so on. Now, let's look at an example of that. So we're going to go into our design view once again, and we can use a practical example. We're going to have discount. So we're going to create a discount field type, and we're simply indicating whether a person has discount or not. So that's going to be yes, no, and we're going to go over to our data sheet view. Some data may be lost. Okay, good. So notice it's a checkbox. So notice is a checkbox. So the check indicates yes. That's important to remember there. A check inside of the box or a tick inside of the box indicates a yes. Or basically, it is on. If you do not see a check, if you do not see a tick, that means it is off. So if a box is checked, it means that record there has a discount. Are you guys following so far?
Yes, sir.
All right. Next we have all object, OLE. This is used for inserting pictures, video clips, sound file, or other objects from other programs and so on. But notice only Windows program. Next we have the Lookup Wizard, which is a drop-down box. It offers you limited choice of options for data entry. Then we have Hyperlink, which is used for web addresses. So say for instance you want to put in an email address. So say you want to put in somebody's email. Actually, let's look at it in both ways. Email. So I'm going to do email plain and email with hyperlink. I'll put hyper there. So I'm going to use hyperlink from the one with hyper, and I'm going to use short text for the one with plain, so you can see the difference. So I'm going back to data sheet. So I just created my two field names there, so you see it out here. So now I can type in my data. So under the first one, I can type in my email. Now notice, it just shows up as plain text, but notice when I type it over in the hyper field type, notice it shows up as blue here. And if you notice, I actually just clicked on it, and it's working as a link. So even if you type in, say for example, google.com, and you click on this here, it's going to open that browser there. Google. So that is the purpose there of that hyperlink data type, to create a link to that web address. And then lastly, we have attachment. You can an image, spreadsheet file, document, charts, other type of supported file that can be attached to a record, similar to attaching a file to an email. So those are your data types that you'll come across. Now to sit inside of your design view, you have short text, long text, number, large number, date time extended, currency, auto number, yes and no, whole object, hyperlink, attachment, calculated. Now calculated is one that we're going to look at later on. And then lastly, we have Lookup Wizard. So the most common ones that you guys are going to use and you should remember about is long and short text, number, date, currency, auto number, yes and no, and the hyperlink and calculated. We won't use lookup, attachment, all so often. So there's only 3 of them we won't use often. So those are your data types that you will be creating for your field names. Now, any questions so far before we move on though? Anyone, any questions?
No, sir.
All right. Now, let's see. Field properties should have actually been first, and then field length and field description. Why I say that is because all of these options are in your field property? Well, except description. So it should be that you're creating your field name first, then setting your data type, then you would set your description. So if we go back over here, so this is going to be set description for field name. So you create a table and you design your table by giving it a name, create the field names, set the data type, and then add a description. Now, description is optional, but it's always good to document. It's always good to be clear as to what is happening. So let's go to description and then we come back to field length. Now it says here that you can enter an optional description for each field in the description column in the design grid or the design view. The description appears on the status bar when the field is accessed on a form. Examples of a description include giving a brief comment about the purpose of the field or the data that should be stored in it. So where is this status bar that we can see this information? Well, let's create some description. Please enter customer first name. Please enter customer last name. So I've entered my description there in line with the corresponding field names. So I'm going to save this. Remember, any changes you make in your design view, you have to save, because if you go and switch out to your datasheet view, it's going to ask you to save. You must first save the table. Do you want to save? Yes. So you can either save first or let that tell you to save. So we're going to click on the field which has first name, so the column here. And if you look at the bottom left, notice the instructions in the status bar here. Please enter customer first name. You guys can see it at the bottom left. Are you guys seeing this in the bottom left?
Yes, sir.
Great.
Yes,
So
sir.
that there is the description that I added. So notice the change to last name. So if I go back to age, use current age. So go save, then go back to data sheet. So if I click on age, notice at the bottom, use current age. So that's where you see that description. So that any person is typing in any information, they will be able to know what is that field about, or even what data should go inside of it. Now, what is the field properties? Monique, could you read that for us?
Field properties. Each field has a set of properties that control the way it stores, handles, and displays data. You normally set properties when you create a table in Design View. However, you can display the Design View at any time to set or change any property settings. The properties available in the Field Properties pane of the Design View window depend on the data type selected in the design grid. Some of the property types are listed in Table 8.4.
Great. So, field properties. So going back to our table. Actually, don't like this. Yeah, that's much better. So after you've set your description, you are going to set the field properties. You set the field properties. So what are the field properties now? Think of the field properties as containing various settings for the data type, for individual data type. So what is the field properties? It's different ways of storing, handling, and displaying the data. So you can say what data can be stored. So for example, with what data can be stored, remember the bottom here is your field properties. And one of the field properties is your field size. So how data is stored, you can say the name should only be 10 characters. That's one way you can indicate how data is stored. So that when you go to enter the data, you can only enter 10 characters. You can't beyond 10 characters. That's one way the field properties allow you to limit how data is stored. Next, how it handles data, how it displays data. So if we go back in, we have different formatting options. You're going to notice that more for number. We can change the format. We can change it to currency. We can change it to percentage. We can change it to a standard number. We can say how many decimal places we want, and so on. We have a variety of options here. So that is the purpose of the field properties, to store, handle, and display the data. Now this can be equivalent, you can think of it as being equivalent to the format box that you have in spreadsheet, where you can format a cell and say what is the data type, what is the various alignment you want, what text font you want, border, all of these things there. That is equivalent to the field properties that you have in your Access software here. Now, another important point to remember about field properties is that it changes depending on the data type. It changes depending on the data type. So notice I'm on number, the number data type, and when I click on short text, it's going to be a different set of field types, field properties. Because if you think about it, the way you represent numbers is not going to be the same way that you're going to represent text. So obviously the options have to be different. So, and not only is it different for each data type, it's also unique for each individual field name. So even though first name and last name have the same data type, they have their own field properties. They have their own set of field properties. Or think of it, they have their own option. So notice I could leave last name with 255 characters. But first name, I could limit it to 10 characters. So each field name, each data type would have its own field properties, and you can choose different ways of representing or displaying the data. Are you guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
That's been before there. So next we have field length. Fulan, can you read that for us? Simango. Pratima. team, are you there? Ray Mario?
Yes, sir.
Could you read field length for us?
Field length. Another important field attribute is field length. Not all database this tables requires you to set a maximum field length, but many do. This is because if you decide in advance the maximum length of a field, the file size can be kept as small as possible, and there is no waste storage. Also, the time taken to process data is kept on minimum. Think what you would have to do when setting the field length for a surname field. A field length of 4 characters would be right for those whose surname contains 4 characters, such as Glenn, but not suitable for Ronald, 6 characters. Some tables allow fixed field lengths, for example, 30 characters. The field stays 30 characters long even when the name Smith, 5 characters, is entered.
Great. So, going back to our list of steps, after we set our field properties, so one of our field properties is going to basically be setting our field length or field size. To set our field size, that's going to be one of our field properties here. So what is the purpose of the field size? Well, as I mentioned already, it limits how many characters can be stored inside of that field. Now, why do we want to limit the size? Why is it that we can't just leave it wide open so that it takes up as much space and we can type in as much data as we want? Well, there are various reasons as to why. One reason is that you might want to limit it because you only want maybe a certain input. For example, there's a field that you only have to type in phone number. We can use that example. You have to type in phone number. So how many digits does a phone number have? Just the phone number. Six. So 6.
There's 7.
Somebody got some. So
Or 7.
yeah, 7. So a phone number would have seven numbers. So and then if you want to organize those numbers so that you can count it properly, you're going to put a symbol between, and you can put a hyphen. So that's going to be 8 characters there in total. So that's just a simple phone number. So 1, 2, 3 hyphen 4, 5, 6, 7. So in total, this phone number here is going to be 8 characters. Just entering that simple phone number here. So in this case here, if you created a field to accept a person's phone number, to accept phone numbers, to store phone numbers in the database, then in this case you would want to reduce the field length. You're going to want to reduce it to 8 characters so that only these 8 characters would be entered, and that basically they can't go beyond 8 characters and enter more numbers. So that's one reason why you would want to limit the size. Now in contrast to this here, it's not mentioned, oh, it's actually mentioned here on the right hand side. In contrast to field size, there's also validation rule. Validation rule. In summary, a validation rule is basically setting a rule as to what the data should be that is entered. So in line with the field size, the field size is going to give you the maximum characters. So you're going to say 8 characters. Only 8 characters could be typed in. But if you think about it, could somebody type in less than 8 characters? Would less than 8 characters be accepted? So we have a field there, and it has 8 characters, the field size. Would it accept less than 8 character?
Sure, 8 is not a maximum,
Yeah.
so it could
If 8
accept
is the
little more.
maximum,
So would it accept less than 8?
Yes, sir. That's why
yes.
it could.
Yes, it's gonna accept less than 8. So it will accept less than 8. So I'm setting the field size to 8. Go into my data sheet there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So person 9, nothing is happening. So the maximum field size is maximum. But what is stopping a person from typing in 1, 2, 3? What is stopping a person from typing in 4, 3, 2? That is not phone numbers. What is stopping them? So, yes, you set a maximum field size, but that isn't ensuring that they enter the correct phone number. Well, that is where validation rule can come into play. You can basically say that the number should have those 7 digits inside of it. So with a combination of validation rule and even input mask, you can set up a pattern of the data so that notice we have the example here, so that the hyphen would automatically appear, and you cannot type in basically anything less than those 7 or 8 characters. So we were looking at why is the field length important. One reason is to ensure that you have a maximum character, but it doesn't restrict you from minimum characters. And to assist you with that, that is where the validation rule and input mask would come into play. Now, we'll come back to these other properties a little later. So that's one reason there, to set the maximum size. Now, what is another reason? Why do we want to set the field size? Well, the other reason, it's right in the paragraph. The field size can be kept small as possible so that there is no wasted storage, and that the time taken to process the data is kept at a minimum. We don't waste any storage, and we minimize the time to process the data. Those are 2 other reasons as to why we limit the field size. Now, let me give you guys a representation as to what we're talking about. So, say this is a long text data type. This is long text. And say this is short text. Now, if you notice, we're just estimating short text is half of long text. So, say for example, in practical terms, this is not real, but just saying, this is 200 megabytes. Long text is taking up 200 megabytes. And short text is taking up 100 megabytes. So every time you use long text, you are taking up 200 megabytes. So imagine if you use 5 more long texts, that's an entire 1 gigabyte of that file there. because you used long text. Now, even if you use long text and you do not use up all the space, the thing is that the system reserves the space. It actually reserves it, even though you might not use it. So, even though you created this long text, and say you only enter one character, you enter one C inside of it. And say that one C, it only uses one small megabyte. What's happening with the other 199 megabytes? Well, it's being reserved. It's still a part of this long text and it's still taking up space. So even though you use only one single character, all of that storage is still being reserved. And as you continue to use more, the storage is going to continue to add up. It's going to continue to grow. So that there is going to waste your space. It's going to waste your storage. Now, a short text, for example, remember this is not real. I'm just giving you some numbers that you can relate with. A short text might be what? 100 megabytes, half of long text. So you enter one character, you're only using 100 megabytes. But now, this is where your field size can come into play. When you add your field size, you can further reduce it. Maybe instead of 100 megabytes, you can now reduce it to 10 megabytes. And it would accept exactly what you need inside of it. Maybe that one letter, that one C inside of it. So now you're taking up 10 megabytes instead of 200 megabytes. So with this example now, you could create what? About 20 more field names and use the same amount of space. So that is what they mean by not wasting storage. Because when you reduce that field size, you reduce how much space is being taken up. And then it's not taking a lot of time to process the data. Using the same example here once again, 200 megabytes of data. It has to read all of this data here, all 200, before it can process the data. Now imagine if there was more, 1 gigabyte. So 1 gigabyte versus 20 megabytes. I'm sure you guys can figure out which one is going to be read faster. Obviously, the 20 megabyte. So the smaller you make your database, the faster it's going to run. And the smaller you can set your field size, it means the smaller you can create your database. Do you guys think you're following on that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, we stopped at a good spot. So, hungry. It's only 2:58. So, in the next class, we are going to look at keys. That's actually going to continue. We're not finished with this series yet. Our steps are created in our database. I should save this here. We're not finished with that as yet. We have to continue those steps. So, what have we looked at so far for today? We looked at what are the rules for creating a field name. What are the rules for setting the different data type? What are they? Why you would choose one over the other? Why do you choose a field description? Why do you set that? We looked at what are the different field properties. We're actually gonna look at more field properties next week. All of these options here, and what is the field length? Any questions before we close off?
No, sir.
Sir, can you please go back to the steps so that I can write them out?
All right. Well, if the rest of you don't have any questions, we're going to end here for today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Enjoy the rest of your day, sir.
Yes, sir, that's it. I've got all already.
All right.